Yes, I can now. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I just can't get the picture. As I said, I'm very bad at it.
Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. So we were discussing the 10th chapter, the 32nd verse, which reads as follows. I'll just read the Sanskrit and give you the English translation. So we just completed verse number 31. And if you remember, we saw how we can see divinity or godhood, which is known as the immanent godhood in all of creation. According to the Hindu philosophy, all of us know there is a transcendental aspect to divinity, where God is considered to be pure consciousness, the underlying consciousness behind the seen and the unseen. Whereas there's the idea of all-pervading or immanent God, not the transcendent God, where you try to see that same divinity in and through creation. And according to the Sankhya philosophy, there is a reality known as Prakriti, which loosely translated in English is nature. Nature that we see around us, both the gross nature, the forces of nature, the subtle nature that we see around us, and also the unseen in the sense they are causal in nature. There are several reasons. We don't see the cause of everything. There is a hidden cause, and there is, of course, a very evident cause which we see. The cause and effect is a very tricky thing. We cannot trace the cause of every phenomena that we see around us in nature. So the philosophers, especially the Vedantic philosophers, they knew that there is the obvious cause which we see behind all the happenings that go around us, and there is a hidden cause, which they call it causal existence. So three existences, existence can be divided into three different levels: the gross universe that we see, and the forces that run them, which is part of the subtle existence, the mental universe, or you can say in Bhagavad Gita, it is known as the cosmic being, the sum total of the universal mind. That is another concept, the cosmic mind. So there is a cosmic mind, and our minds are part of that cosmic mind. So the sum total of the gross things that we see in the universe, the physical universe, as we call it, which is known as Sthula. It is not just the Sthula individual personality that has a gross aspect to it. The sum total of all the beings, whether it is inanimate, animate beings, everything that exists has a specific technical name known as Virat. So Indian philosophy, we divide things into three levels of existences. One is the gross, which is the physical universe that we see, that we can perceive through our sense organs, through our eyes, through our other sense organs. There is subtle universe, which again, the subtle part of our personality and the sum total of the subtle portions of all the beings in this universe. And that includes the inanimate objects, the stones and the immovable, so-called immovable, which we discussed. They don't apparently have a life force behind them, just as living beings have a definite life force. They breathe, they procreate, and then they have all the they grow, and then finally they get destroyed in a gross way. But Hindu philosophy believes that the subtle part of that gross thing which gets destroyed always survives the death of the physical, and that continues, whether it is a plant, a human being, animals, or even the inanimate objects which get destroyed. They get converted from one form into another, that's all. So the solids, when they are melted, perhaps they become liquid, then they go to plasma state, or even further down, they can be resolved to their elements, the very elements. So even after the death of the body, the physical universe also does not, you cannot possibly destroy the whole thing. So that is known as Virat in Vedanta. But behind that is an mental universe, which is the sum total of all our individual minds. So the individual minds are impacting each other, just as the forces of nature and the purely physical objects interact with each other. Each atom is interacting with the atoms around it. So science has proved that there is nothing which can be isolated. There's no isolated system. Every human being, every animal, every plant is part of the whole nature. And when you take nature in its totality, there is hardly any individual jiva or individual soul which you can say is not impacted physically. Physically, we are directly or indirectly connected with each other. So also mentally, they say, as an extension of this theory, even mentally, we are connected. So we see that the thoughts of one person impact the thoughts of others. Even if distance doesn't really matter, because time, space, and causation, which result in the position of different things in the physical universe, they apply to the mental universe as well. So, but the advantage, or maybe the subtlety of the minds, can make it travel a long distance. They don't have physical limitations. So the mind can travel anywhere, sitting in a particular geographical location. It need not be restricted in that location. It can go in imagination. You can travel anywhere, wherever you want. So there is a thought universe, or there is a dream universe, which is quite independent of the physical existence or physical universe. So Hindu philosophy calls that the Sukshma universe, or it is given the name of Sukshma, which is also known as Hiranyagarbha. That is just a technical Sanskrit name. So Hiranyagarbha is the mental universe, the sum total of all the small and big minds. Some minds are highly developed, some minds are crude, like that of an animal. They have limited intelligence, but still they have a mind of their own, which even human beings have. The reactive part of the mind, the instinctive part of the mind, which we share with our animals, which we share with animals. They are almost similar. We react to the stimuli outside, just as any animal would do. Sometimes the animals have a better response, like the dogs. They can smell things much better than human beings. So the reactive part of the mind, which is supposed to be an instinctive mind, is there in all the beings. Even the plants, they exhibit certain reactions to the inputs they get from outside. When there is too much of heat, they react in a particular way, and they have their own nervous system, so-called. I mean, it's not as developed as in animal kingdom, but still they have their own system, which makes them use the forces of nature to grow, and finally they are destroyed physically. But still, that something survives. That is the idea. It's a profound idea, which was not only taken to be a parallel universe, you may say the mental universe, which is known as the Sukshma world. Sukshma means the subtle world, but they, based on that, they also went on to extend existence to another world, which is known as the causal world. The idea is that whatever forces that we see, they are not just by chance, as some of the scientists believed that God plays dice. There was a lot of discussion going on whether there is a free will in this universe. How do things happen? Why do things happen randomly? Why some people seem to be very happy in spite of doing many evil deeds, and many good people seem to suffer? So that doesn't seem to be any logic. If it is just cause and effect, if certain causes lead to certain effects in a human being or in our lives, then good people should always be happy and evil people should suffer the consequences of their evil deeds. But it often doesn't happen. So to explain that, there is a third level of existence which Vedanta says, which can explain this phenomena, which is known as the causal existence. The causal existence is something like you have a repository of seeds and then you plant them. But there's no guarantee that all the seeds will sprout into a big tree. That's the example they give. They literally call it seeds. So all your actions, subtle actions, your thoughts, your physical actions, they are stored. It has to be stored somewhere. It's like hard disk of a computer. You perform so many operations in the using your keyboard and other things, and somehow they are stored somewhere, though you don't know. But there is a data which gets updated, which gets stored somewhere. So something similar, though this is not a good analogy, the actions that a human being does, the thoughts that he thinks, the sum total, and where does it get stored? So to explain that, the third level of personality was, they said the third level of personality is the causal body or the causal existence. It is subtle. All our thoughts, you may say fossilized thoughts, which will have their effects. Right now, they do not give rise to an immediate effect, but still the impact that they have created will someday or the other will be manifest outside through the gross and through the subtle. So they are known as, in a very crude way, Sigmund Freud said they are stored in the unconscious. Now, what is this unconscious? So he says this unconscious, all the thoughts that you think, good and bad, are pushed down into the subconscious. So he could not explain a location for that unconscious. What happens to that unconscious? Why do they not manifest always? In many cases, when there are psychological imbalances, we trace it to some unconscious desire or some unconscious mode of thought which has been petrified, and they remain in the unconscious, or they call it subconscious mind. So that is how the Western psychologists explain our actions, that there are many things deep down in our subconscious mind which now and then come to the surface, and we exhibit behavior which at that time many of us feel that, oh, am I capable of doing all these things, thinking of all these thoughts? Because right from childhood, you don't see the child being trained in a particular way, but suddenly exhibits certain characteristics which is not very natural to him. So to explain that, the Western psychologists say that somewhere deep down in the subconscious, these things were stored, these impulses were stored, and they suddenly come out. And if they are bad, then they cause problems. If they are good, maybe you become a genius. So we find that directly or indirectly, it is our causal existence or the causal part of our personality that determines our future. And as I told you, we discussed in the Rajoga class on Thursday, it is a very important aspect of yoga philosophy. They are known as this causal existence, or they are known as the karmashaya. In yoga, it is known as karmashaya. Karmashaya simply means a receptacle of all our actions, good and bad, not only in this life, because Vedanta believes in rebirth. There is a very strong evidence for rebirth, because You can't explain this birth unless you accept that the cause lies somewhere in the previous birth. So that is a very scientific way of explaining our present actions, which are dependent on obvious causes, which we see we have experience or work. I mean, we have acted in this life, or there are some unknown causes, which we call as the Karana Sharira, where these thoughts are stored in seed form. So Karmashaya means a receptacle of all our karma, good and bad, over several lives, which are stored, and which, when it gets the right impetus, it is something, the example that is given in yoga is, it's like you have some dry seeds and you scatter them on a dry piece of land. They don't grow because they don't have enough water. Moment you give the, sufficient water, if the circumstances are right, the right environment is provided, those seeds, though they may be in a very seed form for several hundred years, they have the capacity to sprout and give rise to new creation. So that is what we see in practical day-to-day life. So yoga says that the seeds which are in seed form, I mean, which are the thoughts and the actions have been stored in seed form in the third, you can say, level of your existence, which is known as Karana Sharira. So we have Sthula, that is the gross body, the actions of which are obvious to us. There is a reaction to every cause, to every effect, to every cause. If we hit somebody, the action and reaction are opposite. Physics teaches us that. If we go still further, then our thoughts, directly or indirectly, they have their repercussions. A good thought sent out will have good reactions. A bad thought sent out will have bad reactions. But very often we see the subtle phenomena doesn't show that kind of cause and effect relationship as we see in the physical. So to explain that, the causal level, some of the actions, some of our thoughts, they remain in seed form. That is how Vedanta explains it. So it is known as Ishvara, the sum total of all our causal existences, the third level of our existence. If they are all put together, the sum total is known as Ishvara. That is the concept of Ishvara, the immanent God. We call it God because it is the sum total. When you make a sum total of all the existences in the universe, and not only the minds, but the subtle existences from which the subtle bodies and the gross bodies are seen or are manifest and are seen to manifest, they are known as, that existence, that supreme existence is known as Ishvara. And that is what we normally worship. When you say God is all pervading, we are actually worshipping the sum total of that cosmic existence. That is how Vedanta explains. So God can be worshipped at different levels. A very primitive person will worship, he began in fact worshipping nature. He began with worshipping nature. He saw certain forces around him. In the Vedic age, you see the earlier hymns of the Vedas. He worshipped this thunderstorm, he worshipped the sun god, he worshipped all the huge forces of nature which he could perceive through his senses. He could see those things and he saw that they were far mightier than himself. The waves of the sea and the huge mountains, whatever was great in the universe physically, which overwhelmed him, he had a respect for that and he started worshipping him as the gross, forces. He started worshipping that. But that concept evolved. Then he said that there is a mind, universal mind, of which our minds are a small part. So that universal cosmic mind must be far greater than our minds, because that will of that cosmic God determines who we are. We seem to have limited willpower, limited cognition, limited feeling. But imagine the sum total of all our minds, how powerful that mind, universal cosmic mind. So that is what is discussed in this chapter. In this chapter, we are discussing the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Says you meditate on the glory of the Lord, because you can say it's a primitive way of understanding the glory of God. We start with the physical, but we don't say that this physical greatness that we see around us it may be insignificant compared to the Supreme Lord, but still there are forces which we should learn to respect, which are far superior to us. So that creates a sort of humility. We, just as a scientist, when Newton was asked, he said, my knowledge is just like a small speck of sand on the vast ocean of knowledge, vast ocean or the vast sand that you see around you. Yeah, the vast knowledge, if it can be compared to the sand on the seashore, he says, I have discovered a few specks of, he was humble enough to know that the knowledge that he possesses compared to the universal knowledge that exists in this universe is a small speck. That gives a kind of humility. So this 10th chapter of the Gita, which is Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna very clearly that this is a part of the whole glory of the Lord. Don't think I'm just giving you a sample of the glories which you can use for your meditation to meditate on the real glory of the Lord. These are partial glories. These are my partial glories. So he gives examples. As we saw, we came up to verse number 32. Now the verses are getting increasingly subtle. We began with the gross. He said, he took some of the greatest mountains. He said, among the immovable mountains, I am Himalayas, because Himalayas in India and everywhere else, we have the Mount Everest. They are supposed to be the greatest mountains among all those. We have hills, we have smaller mountains. I mean, there are larger mountains, but Himalayas, the whole peaks there, if you see, they're so massive that all other mountains appear to be simple hillocks compared to that. So he says that is a good way of meditating on the infinite glory of the Lord. Though your mind is not capable, you take the best specimen among all the created things, say Himalayas. So among the immovable things, I am the Himalaya. I means he's talking from the point of view of that ultimate divinity, which we start seeing that divinity in the physical first. Because our minds are limited, we can understand only the great things that we see around us. We don't see the greatness in subtle things. But slowly he will come to that. Sri Krishna will come to that, saying that the Lord has other aspects which are more glorious than these physical marvels that you see. So among all the animals, I am the lion. For example, because we consider lion historically everywhere, lion is supposed to be the king of the jungle, king of the forest, compared to other animals. Of course, there may be stronger animals, but somehow we associate a kind of nobility with the lion. So also, he takes up different species, animate, plants. Even in plants, some trees are they are very sturdy. I mean, no matter how much you cut, Ashwatha is one such tree, the banyan tree. No matter how much even if you cut the whole tree, from the roots you get another tree. They refuse to die and they live for thousands of years. So that's why he says, among the trees I am Ashwatha. So we saw all those wonderful examples. Now he's coming to the subtle aspect. Till verse number 31, we were discussing the glory of the Lord as we see in the physical universe around us. But as I said, there is a subtle universe behind this physical universe, which animates this gross universe. Behind every tree, behind every plant, there is a strange force. There are different forces. You may call it unseen forces. We have the human being, which it's a marvel how the heart beats, how the 5 forces we have elaborately discussed. The 5 forces that make a human being what he is. If you compare a dead body and the live human being, there are 5 forces which somehow keep him alive. And people know, medicine has showed how vital these forces are. The 5 pranas, as they are called. The 5 pranas, the breathing mechanism, the circulation, the digestion. So they have broadly classified them into 5. And digestion and the nervous energy. That is also a subtle energy which enables the spinal, the autonomous and the other nervous system, the sympathetic and autonomous nervous system to work the way it does. We think it is a mystery, though scientists and medical community has tried to understand the forces, but for certain, everybody knows that there are forces which are beyond our control. No matter how much you try to understand these forces, they simply elude our grasp. They work, they behave in such peculiar ways. So you don't know, even the best doctor cannot predict which force will suddenly stop and then they say the prana has left the body. So our Vedantins were surprised. Said, what are these forces? Who is controlling these subtle forces? Why do different people respond to different kinds of treatment? No matter how much you treat a person, suddenly these forces don't seem to support and suddenly you declare the person dead. So that subtle universe, which is even more mysterious than the physical universe, is tried to be explained here. And the Lord says, part of my glory is physical. Now I have told you all the glory that you see around you. Of course, not all. Some of the sample species he took from animals, from plants, from inanimate objects around us. And he said, you can try to meditate on these great manifestations. Suppose you want to meditate on the animals that live in this universe, then why not meditate on a lion? That will remind you that the glory of the Lord is far more than we imagine. So it's just a pointer towards something more great. So Sri Krishna is slowly taking a sadhaka or a spiritual aspirant from a gross level and said, don't get stuck at the gross. There are greater things that exist than we can imagine behind our physical universe, which is the subtle universe. That is a universe by itself. How are these pranas influencing us? How do they make us alive? How do we survive as a permutation and combination of the different forces? You see, the slight disturbance in any of these forces, say digestion, the heartbeat, the person dies. Though his other forces may have the best digestion, but if it doesn't, his lungs do not support the forces that they say, prana, apana, samana, vyana, and udana. Udana, that is the peculiar and the force which they say is responsible for maintaining our temperature at a particular level. How does it happen? Perhaps it's a mystery for many of us. We may try to explain through biochemical reactions in the body, but still it is a mystery. How does a human body maintain a temperature? Of course, very simplistically, they gave an explanation. It is a udana vayu. Though we do not know exactly, but they say when that's udana vayu, among the 5 forces, one of them is the force that enables us to go against gravity. Most of the forces are trying to pull us and reduce us to material existence. That means death. So when you die, only the material existence remains. What happens? Where do those forces which were alive a few minutes ago, all the forces were working? Maybe they were artificially supported by artificial support, but still there was something in our personality which kept us alive, all the 5 forces. But what happens to them after death? So you see, there is a scientific approach. You just can't dismiss these facts. Where do these forces go? If you see the subsequent verses, you'll come to know that these subtle forces are themselves governed by some still subtle forces, and they are known as the causal forces. So after knowing this background, we'll discuss the verses, because this understanding is very essential, that there is a causal existence which is even subtler than the subtle forces, which guide which of the subtle forces help us to live, and which forces, when they stop working, we are declared dead. We just are reduced to matter. Either you are buried or you are burned, but then there's hardly any difference between a dead man and the inanimate objects around him. Why does that happen? Where do these forces go? So there is an explanation for that, where they say it is they do not vanish entirely, and that is the reason why future birth is explained. That if a person dies, what happens to the forces? For example, they say the forces that are responsible for your circulation of the blood, the assimilation of the nutrients, that is not required, because you don't need, your heart has stopped. So you don't need a force to run that heart, because you are declared dead. So that force vanishes into the other forces of the universe. That's what they say. Similarly, the other forces which are responsible for the circulation or carrying the nutrients and the nervous energy, because you don't use the spinal column anymore, the body has simply disposed of, then where is the nervous system? So that force also gets merged in the universal force. So they say all the four forces other than Udana. Now this Udana force is supposed to be something that survives the human body. That is why even if the person is dead, this Udana Vayu serves as a receptacle to carry forward our Karana Sharira. Karana Sharira means our causal body. All the samskaras that we have gathered, our experience in this universe, our actions in this universe, our thoughts in this universe, whatever we do now, they cannot simply be destroyed. It would be unscientific to imagine that whatever you do, they end with death. You cannot explain that. You have to, that cause which has caused innumerable evil, that cannot simply vanish. You have to reap that is a very scientific way of telling that any action has an equal and opposite reaction. So how do you explain? Suppose a person has killed a lot of people. So will he escape the consequences of that? So to explain that, in a future birth, he has to bear the consequence. That is the wonderful theory of karma, which is there in Buddhism, and it is in seed form in all other Semitic religions as well. As even in the Bible, you will see. So you will find there are some verses which say that the existence continues even beyond the body, as you may call it spirit, or the existence continues in a subtle form, and then till the scientific explanation that karma theory gives is that when you are born again, you are born with that receptacle of karma which was there, and you manifest those slowly as the body grows up. So a suitable body has to be found. So that seems to be a very logical thing explaining rebirth. So here Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that when you meditate on the gross things of the universe, you know it for certain that I am present also in the subtle universe, in the thoughts. I am also present in the forces which suddenly withdraw from a human being. And then that's why Sri Ramakrishna used to tell that God, I mean, if you personalize that God, if you think there is a personal God, then he says God smiles when the doctor says that I am going to save you. Because no matter how much the doctor tries to save a person, if the cosmic will or his cosmic karma is destined to make him give up the physical body, he is going to die. So there is no guarantee. Nobody can say for certain that I can save you. So Sri Ramakrishna used to jokingly say that God smiles when the doctor says that I am going to save you. So he has a big laugh over it. He said, if I have decided, and that vision we'll see in the next chapter, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, I said, you have to fight. You fight this battle, don't bother. The destiny has already been decided by me. The cosmic mind has decided who's going to live, who's going to die. Just be an instrument and fight. Don't be childish. That's what he's going to tell in the next chapter when he shows his cosmic form. He said, you plan so many things in your life, but none of those plans will work out because ultimately it is the cosmic will. I mean, your own karma that will decide what you are going to be in the future. So don't be childish. And he's giving him a hint that through this chapter 10, because subsequently we'll go to chapter 11, where he shows his Vishwarupa. These are not just myths which we have to learn to appreciate, but these are facts based on experience, the gross experience, the subtle experience, which we understand a little bit of the subtle existence, our thoughts, our psychology. And there are certain things beyond psychology, which in Western psychology we call as subconscious mind. Who knows the subconscious mind? How can we deal with that subconscious mind? How can we deal with those uncertainties which a human mind exhibits when he behaves with the people in the world? There's so many unexplained uncertainties. The psychiatrist may or the psychologist may say that this is a reason why these things are happening to you. But is he sure? Can he give a specific? Can he go to the root cause? That's the idea. Unless you go to the root cause of the problem, which is going beyond the causal, trying to first understand the causal, we don't even understand the subtle forces behind our physical existence. And what to speak of the subtle causes. So Patanjali says in yoga that the main aim of the yogi is to go deeper and deeper in his own personality and try to discover the subtle causes that are responsible for his mental states and the physical manifestations. So all our psychosomatic ailments or diseases, of course there are good things also, but aside, we are worried about the problems that we face physically, mentally, and we want a solution, and we try various do some patchwork and try to solve it, patch it up. But if you go to the root cause, you will find the cause lies in this subtle universe. So having understood this background, now we'll go to verse number 32, which slowly takes Arjuna on a journey from the gross. He said, till now I gave you a glimpse of the Lord's glory as it is seen in the physical universe. Now I'll take you in an inner journey. There are greater things to understand and how I manifest at the subtle level. Some of them are known to you, some of them are not known to you, but you hear from me. So the first verse, the 32nd verse, is Sarganam Adi Antah. Sarganam Adi Antascha Madhyam Cha Aham Arjuna Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam Vada Pravadatamaham. So this, I'll translate it. This is in Sanskrit. So we'll split it into different words. Sarganam means among all the creations. I am in the beginning. Now this is a slightly subtle idea that Sri Krishna is introducing. Among all the creations, the apparent creations which has a beginning and an end. Every creation that we see around us has a beginning and the end. So among all creations, I am the beginning and I am the end. What does it mean? Philosophically, we'll discuss that. Cha. And I am also the middle. So the concept of God as creator, which is there in almost all religions, has to be supplemented by another three aspects that we see. We have to generalize this principle. Nobody can create and not expect the thing to be destroyed. So he says, I am in the beginning, I am in the middle, that is creation, preservation, and destruction. That is the cycle that we see in everything, animate or inanimate. Everything has a beginning, life has a beginning, a child is born, then he lives, the body is, it is the middle, and then finally we have the end. So the end, I am in the beginning, that means I am eternal. I am the substratum of that which was in the beginning. I persist in the middle, I am there also among all the creations. If you say I'm just the beginning, so people now say that the universal God is the creator of this universe. Okay, accepted. But that's one part of his role. Then who maintains this? Okay, he is the preserver. Then can he just be a creator and a preserver? Is he not the destroyer? Who is the one who destroys? You can't attribute that to a Satan or some evil force which destroys. The same God that created, the same God which is the underlying truth behind our preservation, and the same God has to be behind our destruction. That is a very subtle idea which explains why the concept of God in Vedanta is a universal concept which says that he is behind all the things. You can't just say, of course you would like him to be the creator, but however much we like the creation to go on happily, and in this novels they say, and they lived happily ever after. It never happens. A day comes when everybody dies. So who explains this destruction? Who explains this transient nature? What is the philosophy behind that? That is what he's trying to explain, that among all the creations, if you think creation is the role of the creator, whom you call as God, he is not somebody who just creates. He creates, no doubt. He preserves as long as the cosmic will enables that creation, that particular aspect of creation to remain. And when the time comes, he destroys. So it's a more rational and logical explanation of the concept of God. So I am Adi. Adi means I am in the beginning. I am at the end. And also I am in the intermediate period between life and death, between creation and destruction. That's the idea. And also Aham Arjuna, I am the Adhyatma Vidya. Adhyatma Vidya means the science of the eternal self. Now that is the beauty of Vedanta. It says that behind this if everything has a beginning, has a middle, and has an end, then everything is temporal, everything is ephemeral. So what's the point? People get disgusted. Then there is a desire in somebody, whether you call it salvation or nirvana in Buddhism or moksha. Buddha and all these prophets, Jesus Christ, you take any prophet in any religion. Religion began with that search of something eternal which will not have a cause, which is not subject to cause and effect. They said, we don't want to be prisoners of this cause and effect theory. Then what's the difference between us and these animals? They also live, they exist for some time, depending on the span of their life, and they die. So should we be subjected to the same cause and effect theory? Is there some greater truth which will enable me to have an eternal life? So that eternal life is what religion promises. That is what is claimed in different languages. So if you see the Bible, if you see the Quran, if you see any other scripture of the world, Vedanta, Buddhism, they posit an eternal, unchanging reality. In Vedanta, you call it Ishvara, you call it God, you call it Brahman, you call it Ahura Mazda in Parsi religion. The names may be different, but the idea is that in the midst of this changing universe, I am looking after, or I am trying to reach a unchangeable, eternal reality, if at all it exists. And because people who have discovered that are known as prophets, they have, in their own way, in different ways, explained the same truth. They've used different terminology. So when Jesus says the kingdom of God is the kingdom of the spirit, he talks of the same consciousness which Vedanta says Prajnanam Brahma. They say pure consciousness which is not subject to the changes that we see in nature. Yoga calls it Purusha. Yoga says the idea is not to be in the in the clutches of Prakriti. Nature may be beautiful, but that same nature can be cruel. That is what we saw, and in the next chapter we'll see it more graphically. He says it's very convenient for everybody to say that we should be born and we should be happy. But misery is just as pleasure is sought by everybody, pain has, as a consequence, pain also follows that. So you cannot avoid pain if you want pleasure. So this transient reality, all the prophets, all the great people who started a particular religion or a spiritual movement, they believed in something which is eternal, holding on to which you solve the problem of life. That is known as Adhyatma Vidya. Strictly speaking, it is known as the science of the self. Now, what that self is the whole issue in front of us. What do you mean by the self? Does the self mean the body? If the self is the body, then it will vanish. Maybe it will live for 100 years. Is the self the subtle forces? The forces come and go. So that is not also the spell. So the spiritual self. So among all the Vidyas, I am the Adhyatma Vidya. So Sri Krishna is very particular here when he says that if you want to know the supreme science in the 10th chapter, don't go after these vibhutis. I just gave you the idea of the vibhutis, the glory, physical glory. Now I am taking you in the subtle realm of existence. But don't think that is the end. Beyond the subtle is also the more subtle or causal existence, which is the sum total of which is the cosmic causal body, or Ishvara, they call it Ishvara. But to understand that and to go even beyond that is known as Adhyatma Vidya. So he says, I am in the beginning, Sarganam, among all the creations. Till now I showed you the glory of all the creations, the glory of the Himalayas, the glory of the greatest species among the created ones. But that was just to help you to meditate on something more subtle. Now we come to the real spiritual part. He says, among all the sciences, I am neither physics, chemistry, biology, all the external sciences. They are, of course, my creations. Even the destructive sciences are his creations. But he says, among them, there is one Vidya or one science or one system of knowledge which is the greatest among them. And that is the knowledge of the self, the science of the self. So, Adhyatma, to know Adhyatma, Adi means to go towards, Atma means to the real self. So we have to penetrate the layers of the apparent self, which we discussed in the class we take on Saturday, the alternate class, the science, Vedanta and the science of human possibilities, where we saw right from beginning, we started with the physical possibility, the limits of physical possibilities that a human being can aspire to attain. Then we have the limits of the mental possibilities, the subtle level where he can have a highly developed skill set or a mind which can make him overcome the limitations of the physical, that is the mental level. But still the possibilities don't end. They go further. We have the science of yoga, which helps you to explore the deeper aspects of our mind. And then we go further and come to Adhyatma Vidya. So that inward journey is what is referred to here. So he says, among all the knowledges, I am there, of course, all. That's why in the first 31 verses, he gave an idea of the creation. He says, I don't ignore that. I don't ask you to ignore the greatness that you see outside. I don't ask you to ignore the Himalayas that you see, because they represent the greatest among the created, the sthavara, that is the immovables. There are many immovable things. There are small hills, small mountains, but among them, if you see the greatest peaks, it gives you, it points to something greater than what you see around you. That is just the beginning, the first 31 verses. But then he says, now you come, all the sciences you have mastered. You see, that's the greatness about this Vedanta. They don't reject lower truth. They say you are traveling from lower truth to higher truth. None of the sciences of earning money, the sciences of excelling in the world, sports, physical excellences, everything is glorified. But there should come a stage when you go deeper. That science is known as Adhyatma Vidya, which we discussed in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna on Sunday, that the Sri Ramakrishna in his very simple rustic language, he said, don't stop, just go ahead. Charai Veti, in the Vedas also they say, don't stop. You do not know whether this science is enough for you. You have mastered this science, okay, look beyond that. Try to go deeper and deeper. So that is why Sri Krishna now has taken Arjuna through all the physical sciences, through all the other psychological sciences, which he is going to discuss now. But he says, among all of them, the search for the spirit, the search for the eternal is the greatest science. And we give it the name of religion. So the truth is to be found in spirit. If you see, the Bible also says, the kingdom of God that we seek is of the spirit, not of the world. Unfortunately, the Jews did not understand that. They asked him, are you the king? He said, yes, I am the king. But in what sense? He was the king of the spirit. That's what he was claiming to be, because he had found the self. He did not want, like the Roman emperors, to rule over. But they thought perhaps it is a threat to us. They thought he was talking about the physical kingdom. And they said the best way is to crucify him. And he just laughed at them, because he says, you can kill me, but that is transient. Anyway, even the greatest emperor will die one day. But my kingdom is the kingdom of spirit. And that is the science I have mastered. And none of you can even if you kill the body, you kill the subtle body, you kill everything that is possible for you to kill, still you cannot kill the spirit which is eternal. And I have attained that. So God is the spirit and should be worshipped as spirit. So all the other things, are they wrong? That is where Vedas say that none of them are wrong. They are lower, like you graduate from kindergarten to first standard. Though PhD may be your goal, but the lower stages are not untrue. And they were particularly useful for you to learn the alphabets, to learn the rudiments of knowledge. So here he says there are many Vidyas, and I have given you a fairly good glimpse of what these Vidyas are. But among them, I am the Adhyatma Vidya. Vidyanam, Adhyatma Vidya, Vidyanam. Vadaha, Pravadatam. Pravadatam means there are many gossips and controversies going on. Among them, I am logic. Vadaha. Vadaha means logic. So a person who speaks, he says there are arguments, there are gossips, where people fight for the sake of fighting. There are verbal fights, which are not based on logic, which are based on I am right and you are wrong, and then the stronger person wins. But I am not there, because these are lower fights. I am, if at all you want to have a decent conversation, then it should be based on logic, based on rationality. So among all the conversations, some of them do not even deserve the name of conversation. They are just opinions and my personal faiths, which I want to emphasize. And I believe my dogma is the best. My religion is the best. The spiritual ideas that I hold, but you have to prove. So Sri Krishna says here to Arjuna, among all the controversies or among all the interactions, verbal interactions that go on, that pass on, there are good conversations, there are bad conversations, there are quarrels, there are gossips, untrue conversations. Among all of them, the best among all of them is logical conversation. Vadaha. It is known as Vadaha. In Sanskrit, it is known as Vada. So of all created beings, I am the beginning and the end and also the middle. That means I am eternal. So that is what you should seek through the Adhyatma Vidya. And of all those who debate, I am the the debate which is based on reason. So the scientific approach to religion, the principles of science are really good, because in science, the basic principle is something that you cannot prove, or something, if a scientist shows that he has a better explanation through experimental verification, if he shows he is better, then the old one is rejected. Though it was useful earlier, but now I have discovered something better. So that scientific spirit helped science to grow. Every day we are growing because they have that they are protecting at least the scientific community. I'm not talking of people who just want to protect what little they know and they are not open. There are scientists who are fanatical as well, just as we have fanatics and dogmatic people in the religious field. So here he says any science which is based on reason is I am there. I am there means that is desirable, because science says that if you can reasonably prove that this is a better way of explaining or even doing certain things, it is good. So we have to understand in this chapter, this verse number 32, we are coming to the end now. So I'll just conclude, but briefly to summarize what I said, that this chapter is an exciting journey. It starts with the physical, it tries to explain the subtle, and then it will ultimately show that even one has to go beyond the cause, and the transient or the transient nature of Prakriti has to be overcome. It has to be transcended. And when you transcend them, you rationally come to a state which takes you beyond this cause and effect. So that is known as Adhyatma Vidya. So what that is, we will see in the next class. So I'll take your leave. If there are some questions, if there is some time, I can just there are many questions, but I think that we don't have much time. I'm sorry, I just took 5 minutes more. So I'll just try one question. Please, can you explain how could we develop our Udana Vayu so that it is strengthened after death? Since it acts as a receptacle to carry our impressions, samskaras, we must make sure that it takes us to the correct destination out of this birth and death cycle, not back to a new body and rebirth. Okay. You see, this is something, there is a book which is known as How is a Man Reborn? It is written by one of our ministers of St. Louis Center in USA. He wrote a beautiful book which is known as The Goal and the Way. It's one of the best books in English, at least, on Vedanta. If you read through the whole book, you will find many things answered in that book. One of the chapters is How is a Soul Reborn? Now, this is according to the Vedanta and also Buddhism and others which believe in rebirth. So this Udana Vayu is a typical concept or idea which you can find in the Upanishads or the Vedanta. So Udana Vayu, as I said, it is something which is very subtle. So that is strengthened because that remains as long as you don't get salvation or nirvana or mukti, one will be subject to rebirth. Now, it's not the Udana Vayu that we should be concerned about, because Udana Vayu is just a vehicle. It is like saying the engine is important. The outer vehicle has only one function, the body of the car or the vehicle. It allows you to have the engine and other gadgets inside. But what is more important is the engine, our samskaras, our karmashaya. So how that Udana Vayu acts? It acts because the stronger the spiritual nature and the stronger the human personality, that is highly developed. Just as if you want to have a very strong body, you pranavayu, that you do exercises which strengthen your breathing capacity of the lungs And you can do wonderful achievements using that. Sports people, they train the pranas, different pranas. They see that they take nutritious food, they get the right muscle strength, they get the right. So all the pranas are strengthened when we are alive. Whereas to strengthen the Udana Vayu, also you need, it is strengthened through a proper thinking process. I mean, if your samskaras are good, naturally that prana also is strengthened along with the other pranas. Of course, the other pranas, they stop acting, or they stop being significant in our lives after death, because you don't need prana, breathing, when the lungs are not functioning. So that prana vayu, developing that prana vayu is good as long as you are alive. It is important to have a strong body as far as possible, though it is not the goal of life, because when you die, that physical strength just vanishes in a moment. Whereas according to this Udana Vayu, which is, though it is a very it is a very significant thing. Udana Vayu is responsible for our spiritual elevation. You see, when you get a very good mood, when you say you are in a very spiritually high mood, it is the Udana Vayu is very active. So it's a continuous process. You can't have a specific process for strengthening it, but it can be strengthened by our spiritual practices, because that is the only thing that survives our physical death. All other prana, all other life forces, they are buried. I mean, they just merge in the universal forces. We don't need them. If we don't have a heart, we don't have a lung, then what will we do? Those forces are, even the nervous system which converts our thoughts into our actions, our impulses, the sense organs gives us inputs and we react to them, the sympathetic and autonomous nervous system. All those things do not have any significance after death. So we spend a lot of time when we are alive to develop these pranas, life forces. But Udana Vayu can be developed. The simple answer to that question is by doing spiritual practices or spiritual techniques which enable us to ensure. That's why Arjuna is telling in one of the chapters, Krishna is telling Arjuna was worried that, see, I understand what you said, but all these things which I do, suppose I die tomorrow, what will happen? All my effort will it go vain? He says, no. It won't disperse like the clouds disperse. It will be stored. That is exactly what he meant, that it will be stored. Nothing is going to be lost. Gross body may go, but the subtle, whatever actions you have done, the good actions, he says the doer of good never comes to grief. What he means is he strengthens his causal body and the Udana Vayu simultaneously. And if you read that chapter on how is a man reborn, he waits till he gets a very strong or a very suitable physical body to continue his journey. That's the idea. So the Udana Vayu is strengthened by Adhyatma Vidya. As Sri Krishna says, among all the knowledges, I am the Adhyatma Vidya. So I'll take your leave now. Shall we conclude, Maharaj? I think I have taken a little more time. I'll conclude. So we will be having the class on not next Saturday, but the Saturday after that. Only one